we are officially entering the final arc of Dr. Stone. Well, at least according to Twitter. The tricky part is that as of this tweet and the time of recording, there's nothing to go off of besides this tweet. And while I don't speak Japanese, there have been issues in the past with other series where it's announced that a series is entering a final arc, when the Japanese word for arc can really mean part or saga. Regardless, it's undeniable that Dr. Stone is beginning to wrap things up. So in this video, I'm gonna discuss what we can expect in upcoming chapters, and how the manga might end. If you couldn't tell by now, this video will contain spoilers. Before I get started, make sure to comment with your thoughts on the final stage of Dr. Stone. I'll pick my favorite and share it as comment of the week in the next video. This week's comment goes to Party Jams, who shared their thoughts on Season 3 of Dr. Stone. If you'd like more Dr. Stone and other manga discussions like this one, then make sure to subscribe and follow along with each week's video. So to get started, let's talk about how many more chapters we can expect. Because, let's be honest, it'd be nice to have some kind of countdown as we consume massive amounts of copium. Again, I'm recording 2 days before the official release of 212, and right now it's unclear if we're officially ending the current part of the main story and entering a new one. I do want to note, however, that it's 213 that's supposed to be the beginning of this so-called final arc. So that chapter might turn out to be the official start of a new part. Either way, we can still guess how many chapters are left based on what we already know. Assuming this is in fact the start of a new main story part, then it's safe to assume this final part will be at least 50 chapters and will consist of at least 2 arcs. Looking back, Part 3 was over 50 chapters, and if Truth of the Petrification is ending, that would make that part over 70 chapters. So 50 is the Shire guess, 70 or more is the long end, and 60 is a reasonable middle ground. Now, although nothing's official, there's just no way we're wrapping this up in one arc. And I mean arc as in Age of Exploration or Treasure Island. There's just no way we're wrapping up this series in less than 40 chapters, considering how much has been set up. But more on that in a few seconds. For now, assume that we're getting 2 more arcs that will consist of something close to 60 chapters. Maybe we'll get 3 arcs, but I'd say that's the absolute maximum. But now that we have a rough timeline, we can begin to discuss what's probably going to happen. And while there is a ton we're all probably waiting to see, like our favorite ships becoming a couple, which, you know, for like 90% of the fanbase is just Senku and Gen getting married, I want to hold off on trying to predict every little thing that might happen. 1, because this video would be like 3,700 minutes long if I tried to do that, and 2, because there's at least a year's worth of chapters left and a lot might change in just the next month alone. So rather than get too specific, I'm gonna present a few of my theories for this final part. Actually, before we do that, let's just make sure we're clear on what's definitely not happening. For starters, if we just imagine what's going to happen without considering the unknowns, then the logical course of events would be the Kingdom putting together the space rocket, the 3-man team confronting Y-Man, and then the eventual return of civilization to its former glory. Boom, everyone lives happily ever after, cue end credits. That'd be nice, right? Just everything goes according to plan and nothing bad ever happens. Too bad we know that ain't happening. I mean, come on, what did you expect? This is Senku we're talking about, someone with the world's worst luck. You just know something's gotta go wrong. So, obviously that scenario's a big dud. Now, another thing that's definitely not happening is finding out that Y-Man was Senku's biological dad all along. I'm not saying it's impossible, in fact there is a pretty good argument to be made for it, but it just would not work for the story. Like in Star Wars, that kind of reveal is meant to force the main character to question their identity and their values. But since we all know Senku doesn't give a crap about any of that kind of stuff, this kind of reveal would go right over those leaks he calls a head of hair and would effectively be a giant waste of our time. So, no smooth sailing, and no father-son reunion with Y-Man. If none of that's happening, what can we expect? Well, the first thing we can definitely expect is a revelation about the International Space Station. In Treasure Island, we learned that the ISS was still up in space at the time of Byakuya's death. Since whatever was holding it up then probably continued to survive just like it did before, that means there's someone or something manning the ISS right now. And with Dr. Stone being a story rich with logical explanations, except for that whole deal with Tsukasa and the lions, Going up to space is the perfect time to be like, oh hey, that thing that should have crashed like it did in the anime, what's it doing up here? Let's go check it out. Now, personally, I'm betting on Rei. Although Inagaki said the reboot is non-canon, everything's been consistent with the main story, and including Rei would be the perfect way to tie Byakuya into the final battle against Y-Man. Even if it's not Rei, there needs to be some explanation for how the International Space Station continued to orbit the Earth. Now, moving on, another thing we can definitely expect is a good old-fashioned dose of talk no jutsu on the moon. We've been talking about the pros and cons of the Medusas for a while now. Plus, there's this whole deal with Y-Man where first we assume he must be a bad guy, but then we find out how awesome the Medusas are, and we start thinking, you know, maybe this Y-Man isn't so bad after all. So at some point on the moon, we're going to get some kind of conversation between Senku's team and Y-Man, where we learn all about Y-Man's plans and build up to this final series-defining dialogue about using dangerous science for the good of mankind. Of course, there's still going to be some kind of battle against Y-Man since this is the final arc. Plus, it'd be kinda pointless to bring someone like Tsukasa along just to have him be like, alright, you guys do your thing, I'm just gonna look for moonstones for my Clefairy over here. In any event, expect Senku to be rocking some serious Naruto vibes on the moon. But speaking of the moon, here's where we start doing a bit more speculating. Specifically about the long-awaited three-man moon team. And yes, I say long-awaited because this is something we've been talking about ever since the end of Stone Wars. God, remember Stone Wars when we didn't even have fidget spinners yet? Good times. Anyway, I'ma go ahead and say the teased team of Senku, Ryusui, and Tsukasa is our best bet. Although there's a strong chance of a twist where a last-second change is made, this team makes the most sense. Not only are Ryusui and Tsukasa the best pilot and fighter respectively, but they've both been essential to the story's broader narrative about science and desire. Ryusui had his own little chat with Zeno about science and greed, and Tsukasa was the first person to bring up the issue of immortality with Senku. So it only makes sense that these two would be there alongside Senku to make that conversation about science, desire, and humanity all the more engaging. But why am I so sure Senku's gonna be going, you might be thinking? Couldn't Chrome take over? Well, besides Senku being the main character, there's a very tragic reason Senku will ultimately be going to the moon that I'll share in just a few minutes. But before that, let's talk about the possibility of a final war on Earth. This involves a fair bit of speculation because, as things are right now, there's literally no enemies on Earth. But when you consider the fact that our estimated timeline is something like 60 chapters, a final war seems all the more likely. I mean, there's no way building the rocket takes that long, and there's no way the moon mission is taking that long. Plus, look at every part before this one and tell me the last time there wasn't a big battle over the Medusa. Like, there has to be some kind of conflict, especially since things have been a little too easy lately. Now, in terms of how this could go down, I should point out that some people have noted the possibility of a civil war following a leak about immortality. If you ask me though, I think that's a pretty unlikely scenario considering how quickly Senku's managed to recruit people, and how easily they kinda just follow whatever he does. The more likely scenario is some new villains making a last-second appearance. This still hasn't been addressed yet, but we can't forget the big flash of light from the radio tower that took place after the second petrification. I don't know about you, but that seems like a pretty big hint that somebody with flashy technology is just waiting to mess things up for Senku. Oh, and before I move on, Stanley's definitely making a redemption comeback. Calling it right now. The gang's gonna be pushed into a corner, somebody revives Stanley, and then he's gonna pull out the blicky, light a smoke, and say something like, "Not bad, Junior Science Brigade." Quote me on that, please quote me on that. Now, for my last theory, let's talk about our boy Senku. Specifically, why Senku is going to get left behind on the moon. Let me explain. Regardless of whatever talk no jutsu goes down, something's gonna go wrong on the moon. Again, something always ends up going wrong. Plus, do you really think it'd be as easy as going to the moon, kicking Y-Man's butt, and then going back home? Of course not. Y-Man's gonna have some trick that will put the moon team, if not the entire planet, in some kind of pinch. I can't say what exactly, but knowing Senku and knowing how this story's been building up, allow me to offer my theory for how it will ultimately go down. Y-Man pulls some shenanigans, the Moon team is forced to ditch the Moon so they don't get petrified, but Senku tricks the other two into leaving without him in Chrome's return vessel so that he can hold back Y-Man and save everyone else. And here's why. Whenever there's been a big battle with petrification, the last person standing is left feeling alone. Senku felt this way on Treasure Island before he got a call from Ruri, and Suika felt this way when she was forced to save everyone at South America. This idea that working diligently towards grand achievements can feel lonely is so important to the narrative, because it leads to the follow-up that you're never as alone as you think you are. So, because these themes are so important, there's just no way Senku doesn't at least try to sacrifice himself and bear humanity's burdens all by himself like he always tends to do. Plus, how cool would it be if we got a callback to Chapter 1 where we watch a petrified Senku count the seconds down on the Moon until he gets rescued? But with that, those are all my theories right now. I know things have been moving pretty fast lately, but I have faith that Inagaki will execute on everything he's built up and deliver a beautiful and iconic ending. And that's it for this discussion. If you enjoyed this discussion, then make sure to like the video. Don't forget to comment with your thoughts down below. And if you'd like more Dr. Stone and other manga discussions like this one, then make sure to subscribe and follow along with each week's video. Thank you for watching, and I hope to hear from you soon.